if you feel like your hamstring and even hip mobility sucks no matter what you try to do, whether that's stretching or foam rolling or doing activation drills, then this video is exactly for you. There's a very common issue I see with people that tend to do a lot of hamstring flexibility and even hip mobility work. They tend to be overlooking how the role of the pelvis is affecting how well the muscles can work and the resting positions of their muscles. Because many people think that muscles are driving the positions of joints, and by activating or stretching muscles, you can change the position of joints, which is true to a certain extent, but underneath all of that, your joint position is going to dictate what your muscles are capable of doing in the first place. Now, muscles should have a degree of resting slack in them, meaning that they have a neutral position where they can be able to stretch out or contract depending on what the task they're doing necessitates that muscle's activity be. Now you can see that if I'm in a more forward pelvis position right here, or an anterior pelvic tilt, that is going to stretch out this upper attachment and fibers of my hamstring right here. And this is actually creating more tension on the muscle, not less. If I go into a posterior pelvic tilt, that is going to shorten the hamstring, and this also creates more tension on the muscle. So you can have tension be created both ways, by stretching it out and also contracting. Ideally, we'd have it in a neutral position where it could do both depending on the task. Now, what I see most commonly is people who present with what would be initially perceived as really limited hamstring flexibility, i.e. they have less than about a 45-ish degree straight leg raise, or they can't really touch their toes effectively or forward fold effectively without feeling a ton of tension in their hamstrings. This is not because the hamstrings are too short. It's actually because the hamstrings are already in a lengthened position and you're tugging on them more when you put them in a further elongated position. So these are people that tend to have anterior pelvic tilt. If you take a muscle that's already elongated and try to elongate it more, eventually you're going to hit an end range of what that muscle can actually elongate to. That's very commonly what's happening when people have less than about a 45-degree straight leg raise, or they can't really touch their toes. And if you're really in this anterior pelvic tilt position, your femurs are going to be biased towards more of a position of internal rotation. So many of these people present with very limited hip internal rotation because they're already in a position where they're really in this anterior orientation of their pelvis and they're taking up all their internal rotation space. So the goal isn't to stretch out the hamstring more, it's actually to recruit the upper hamstring fibers and pull the pelvis into a better position. And that is a more neutral position, which will allow the hamstrings to be able to elongate and which will allow the femurs more range of motion because they're starting in more of a neutral position. This is why I've taken people who have limited straight leg raises or they feel tightness in their hamstrings in their straight leg raises, and then I turn their hamstrings on, test them again, and their range of motion is better and their hamstrings are less tight, which sounds crazy to the average person who thinks that hamstrings being tight limits your straight leg raise. But if you understand the mechanics of what I just talked about, it actually makes a lot of sense. Now, another limitation of your straight leg raise and your hamstring flexibility would be internal rotation, because to move into a 45-degree straight leg raise, after that, you have to move into an internally rotated position of your hip. Your femur needs to internally rotate once you get beyond 45 degrees. So if you have a lack of internal rotation within your hips, you're probably not going to be able to have a very good straight leg raise or even a toe touch, because you need to move into that deeper level of internal rotation as you get deeper into a toe touch. So if you want to improve your internal rotation and open up space for you to have a better straight leg raise and a toe touch or a forward fold, then you can try this exercise right here. Understanding how your joints are affecting the resting position of your muscles and limiting them from doing certain things is a foundational principle of my programs, like my Beginner Body Restoration program. You can learn more with the link down below. This is the 90-90 hip lift with ball hold from Postural Restoration Institute. To set up for this, we need to be, as the name suggests, in a 90-degree bend at both our knees and our hips. Now, we have a little shelf set up here because it's going to be most helpful for most people to have something to dig down with. And we need to do this still with the feet on the wall. If the feet are off of the wall, that is not good. So the whole foot needs to be flat here. And we have a ball in between the knees that allows the knees to stay in line with the toes. So it shouldn't be too small where the knees are collapsing in or too much where the knees are too wide. It needs to stay in line with the toes. So we're going to initiate this by dragging down on the wall with the heels, but keeping the whole foot flat. Now that shelf is there to allow you to do that more easily without the feet moving. If there's no shelf, the feet should still not move. But the tailbone is going to come off of the floor as a result of that, and the hamstrings should engage on both sides. Now, a good cue I like to use is imagine that you're a piece of Velcro being pulled off of the ground one vertebrae at a time. That should allow you to keep that tuck of the hips and keep the low back flat still. So now all he's gonna do is keep his hands on his low ribs, get a full exhale through the mouth as if he's sighing, and that's going to engage his side abs. After he exhales for about 5 to 10 seconds, he needs to hold that very slightly as he closes his mouth, inhale through the nose, and he's going to feel his chest expand, and that's great. He's gonna do that for about 5 breaths. The most common mistake on this exercise is people are gonna pull the toes back excessively, and we don't want that to happen. We want the whole foot flat. The other thing is people are gonna lose their heels and try to pull down with the toes instead. So just make sure that you're concentrating on creating awareness between the heels and the hamstrings here. The other thing is people are gonna get their hips too high off of the ground. So this isn't a bridge, this is a hip lift. So make sure that the pelvis is off of the ground, but the low back is still on the ground mostly. You may get a little bit higher depending on the person, but for the most part, you're gonna keep the low back flat. This is the staggered hip extension bridge. The purpose of this is to drive some end range hip extension on this downside leg right here. So to set up, we need a box up against a wall, or we need the end of a wall where there's some open space and we can keep this foot up against that wall, and also this leg right here is flat on the floor. Now, we just want a 90-degree bend at both the knee and the hip on this side right here. And the whole foot's gonna be flat on both sides. This is sort of in an A-frame position. And Trevor, what I want you to do is feel the inside edge of your foot on both sides. So that's going to entail feeling the inner heel and the ball of the big toe right here on both sides, but not rolling excessively inwards. He's keeping the whole foot flat, just focusing on that area. And then what I want you to do is pull down with this leg, but that's not actually going to drag his foot down. It's just the intention of sliding that heel down. And that's going to help get his hips slightly off the ground. He's also going to simultaneously push through this downside right here. This is more of a pull down, that's more of a push down through that inside edge. And that should raise his hips slightly off the ground, and he should maintain a little bit of that posterior pelvic tilt. He should feel a good bit of hamstring on this leg, some upper hamstring, potentially some lower glute on this leg right here. And he's gonna exhale as he comes up, and he's gonna inhale as he comes down. Exhale as he comes up. Good, big open mouth sigh, getting all that air out. And then inhale as he comes down. We may cue you to hold that end range position depending on who you are and what your needs are. The most common mistake in this is that people are going to try and get their hips too high up in the air. Then they're just gonna arch their back. It's not gonna be too good. It's like you're a piece of Velcro being peeled off of the ground, one strand at a time, going that slow, and that's gonna help you maintain that optimal pelvic position that we're looking for there. The other thing is that people will push either too much through the downside leg or pull too much with this. It should be a 50-50 split, so make sure that you're not leaning towards one side or the other.